Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. This is our last podcast of 2023. I'm going to give you my takeaways, my biggest takeaways for 2023 and the lessons that we learned in 2023 and what we can take going forward. Also, Nikki Haley's missed moment. Nikki Haley, it doesn't matter if there was a Democrat plant sitting inside of the audience at New Hampshire. You should have stressed our Republican bona fides. We are the party that ended slavery. We are the party that gave blacks civil rights. We are the party that allowed blacks to vote, freed the slaves. We are the party of women's suffrage. We are the party of the civil rights movement until the Democrats came in the early 60s and tried to hijack it. So we'll talk about all of that. Plus, we got more. Trump has been removed from the ballot. What in Maine? What is it about the democratic process that Democrats don't like? Why are they scared to run on their policies? We're going to be talking about that and more on this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please stay tuned. All right, first, guys, before I go forward, I want to just ask you to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. And by the way, you can review us. Make sure, especially on YouTube and Rumble, if you review, you give us a 5. That's going to help more people see this podcast. I am asking you to do that. I also subscribe to the podcast, share it with your friends, share it with your neighbors, share it with commies, share it with whomever this will benefit, and it'll benefit all Westerners, Americans specifically. All right. So please make sure you do that. Follow me on social media. We're on all things social media. We're on Instagram. We're on X. We're on what? Facebook, True Social Getter. Wherever I am, the Carl Jackson Show is where you can go to find me. Man, I got a lot that I want to run through today. I do want to talk to you real quick too about mypillow.com. I want to make sure that I get this right. But anyway, mypillow.com. There's Giza Dream Sheets that are available to my listeners exclusively. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and enter my name. So here it is. MyPillow is excited to bring you their biggest bedding sale ever and just in time. Actually, for this is for the new year. You have Giza Dream Sheets that are as low as $29.98. Also, you got a set of My Pillowcases for as low as $9.98. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com, click on that radio podcast square, and enter my name, Carl, or give them a call, 800-858-0263. All of my pillow products are on sale for you. All right, 800-858-0263. Mention my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, or go to mypillow.com. Click on the radio podcast square, and enter my name, Carl, at the top of the page. That is spelled C-A-R-L. Okay, so where do I want to start here? First off, let me give you some takeaways for 2023, and then I'm going to I want to go to Nikki Haley real quick, and also they have the left again has removed Trump, or they're moving to try and remove Trump from the ballot in Maine. I'm going to tell you why that is a complete and utter joke, and also I'm going to give you some real solutions to the the rogue prosecutors that are out there. I'm going to give you some real solutions. So make sure you tune in to the entire podcast and share this podcast, por favor, with your friends and neighbors. So first, let me start with some of the 2023 comment on YouTube, por favor. We would appreciate that as well. And I'm trying to work on getting back to messages. I suck at that. I'm good at it on social media, or getting much better at it. Not as good on YouTube, but I promise you that I will be working on that. Actually, Ben Shapiro wrote a piece, and I originally found it in Daily Signal, and then later I saw it in Town Hall. But I do want to make mention of it. He had many of the same takeaways that I had, but obviously, like only Ben Shapiro did or can do, the way he sums it up so concisely and brilliantly, I wanted to bring to your attention some of the issues that are at play today. He says, lesson number 1, lots of people do not think like we do. Speaking of we, the conservative movement, right? He says a failure to recognize the truth of this lesson leads to failures of imagination that in turn lead to suffering and death. Now, obviously, Ben Shapiro is a Jew, but I think this is a very important lesson because immediately he goes to the Israel-Hamas war, which I think is a big deal. And And I think it's a very important issue, and it's a very important issue for Westerners to pay attention to. So not all people think like we do. We're seeing that with the rise of anti-Semitism that we're seeing across college campuses. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that it is a rise as much as it is we're just seeing it. I mean, we're just seeing it. This is these incubators of hate known as colleges and universities across the United States of America are basically breeding people to hate Western civilization, to hate Judeo-Christian values, to hate Jews, to hate Christians. And so now we're seeing it exposed. But he's saying, being aware that all people don't think like we do. He says, when Hamas slaughters infants in their cribs, rapes women in front of their husbands, could you imagine that, man out there? Can you imagine that? Ooh, and takes them captive back to Gaza, tortures, murders civilians. That isn't because of some outsized grievance. And that's what the left wants you to believe. It is something that the United States has done. It is something that Israel has done that is somehow warranted, that evil, demonic behavior, and nothing could be further from the truth. He says, pretending that members of Hamas are simply freedom-loving people who seek material prosperity, quiet family lives, and tolerance for those who think differently is just plain wrong. And he's so right. There was a video that I saw from one of the young ladies, I forget her name, excuse me, I'm so sorry, I should have pulled it up, that was held captive in Gaza. She was kidnapped during October 7th. No telling what happened to her, but one of the things that she wanted to share is she wanted to know that it wasn't just Hamas. She was literally being held in a family's home, a mom, a wife, a husband, children, and she was thinking, what the heck, are they doing holding me here? She didn't know what to think, except she realized, oh my God, Hamas works with regular everyday citizens inside of Gaza. Listen, Hamas has a 60% approval rating inside of Gaza. These people want Jews dead. So that was a very fascinating interview that I saw. Man, I think I saw it on the Blaze. It's also, he says, it's also leading foolish Westerners to believe that appeasement of Hamas sympathizers will somehow alleviate Hamas's evil. Listen, the only negotiation that should happen when it comes to Hamas is what size bullet to use, in my opinion. That is absolutely it. You're not going to be able to negotiate with evil. You're not going to be able to negotiate with people that want more civilians killed just so they can use that as propaganda. So they will literally, when they're having a fight with the IDF of Israel, all right, when they're having a war against Israel, what they'll do is literally put civilians in the way just for propaganda purposes. You can't have a decent conversation with people like that. You can't negotiate with people like that. He talks about, Ben Shapiro does, how it's a lie to think that these people are just, these happy-go-lucky people. They want some of the same things that we want. It's simply not true. And that's what Israel sadly turned their eyes to for 15 to 20 years, thinking they could somehow contain these evil people. And it's simply not true. We've got to deal with evil head on. Lesson number 2, Shapiro writes about, the next generation is in serious danger. He said a recent Harvard-Harris poll showed 79% of young Americans 18 to 24 years of age agree that white people are oppressors and people of color are the oppressed. Remember the podcast that I did just the other day, talking about how white men, the white male revolt that is coming? I believe this is true. There's no way a society can remain, a civil society can remain, if it goes tribal. If it's my tribe against your tribe, if it's not the United States of America, we fail. All right, this nation will absolutely collapse. If the only way you start viewing people is oppressor versus the oppressed, there's no way this society lasts. All right, so that's lesson number 2. We've got to defeat this tribalism. We got to defeat this DEI and this CRT that is running rampant, not just on college campuses, sometimes even in churches. And also, I mean, the left is starting as young as pre-K with some of these people. Lesson number 3, he writes about how weakness breeds aggression. We've seen that from Afghanistan to Crimea. He writes, how, remember the Afghanistan debacle, or the surrender. Joe Biden leaves Afghanistan, leaves even Americans behind, leaves our allies that were on the ground behind. And the rest of the world saw this, including Vladimir Putin of Russia. And he said, oh, my God, if this guy will abandon his own people, if this guy will leave a war zone, leave $85 billion in military equipment behind and let the Taliban just come in and take over, why not? Why not take over Ukraine right now? Seems like a good time with this feckless leader inside of the White House. So that bred aggression. He said Russia moved on Ukraine not predominantly because it feared NATO's dominance. Now, I listen, I was never for, I don't even know how to explain this now. It's been so crazy over the since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but I always thought that Putin was going to go in, so I thought that Biden needed to do something beforehand to make sure he scared the crap out of Putin. He never did that. Putin came in, and then all of us were like, okay, man, we don't want World War III, including myself. We don't want World War III, but the truth of the matter is, 2020 hindsight, it would have been better for Biden to okay, I forget who wanted to give. I think it was Poland that wanted to give Ukraine fighter jets. Let them fight. Give them the military equipment that they need. Back out. Let them fight. We don't need to send them a bunch of money. If they want to buy military equipment from us to defeat Russia, we could have done that. But now we are basically in a bit of a quagmire where we're having to send money, or we don't have to, but we have been up until recently sending money to keep this bad boy going. But weakness breeds aggression. That's what we're seeing. But again, this line, Russia moved on Ukraine not predominantly because it feared NATO's aggression, which I think is a really great line, but because it sensed Western weakness. Putin saw Biden in the White House. The same could be said with the Iranian government. The Iranian government flipped the switch, decided to fund proxies all over the place. I was reading today on the tip sheet, if I could get to this, I think they're Uranian, and I don't even know how we know this for sure. I mean, obviously we have intelligence, but who knows? But at least according to this column, let me make sure that I get the right number here. Let's see. Watch the Hamas says Israel border. Iran's production of highly enriched uranium nearing weapons grade levels. All right. So now, this according to Fox, Iran is currently enriching uranium up to 60%, which is reaching the 90% needed for weapons. All right. So, so we're in very dangerous times, and obviously you have the Biden administration that are working with Iran. It's weird. They say that they don't want the Israel-Hamas war, but they're still finding ways to help Iran out. It is the craziest. It is the craziest thing. The people in the White House are absolutely dumb and evil. This was a. Okay, I'll get to that. I'll have to get to that at another time. There is so much stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff I could talk about today, but I'm a little pressed for time, so I will not. Lesson number 4 from 2023, what goes around comes around. He says this has been true for quite a while when it comes to American politics. Voiding the judicial filibuster means the other party will cram through nominees on a party line vote. Militarizing the executive order will allow the other party's president to do the same. Today, Democrats seem excited to weaponize the DOJ in order to target former President Trump, which I'll get into shortly, the leading candidate to face off against Biden. What are the chances that precedent will be utilized by Democrats' opponents in the future, meaning Republicans, all right? Refusal to acknowledge this reality means an endless cycle of escalating reprisal that ends only with actual conflict. I've said for years, I cannot stand executive orders. It is the one thing I wish Republicans would have worked with Trump early on in the presidency. There was too much friction there. They hated Trump. He hated them. And we didn't get a lot done. We didn't get much legislation done. We got tons of deregulation done, which was absolutely great. A ton of great executive orders by Trump. The problem they were executive orders. So the moment that Biden came in office, he was able to reverse virtually everything that Trump had done. And then they've just been stacking the benches with these radical nut jobs like we see at the Supreme Court in Colorado. I'm not sure if Biden actually appointed those people. I believe Obama appointed some of them. But anyway, that's what we're seeing. One final lesson he talks about. So we have weakness breeds aggression. Actually, I didn't finish up with that because he talked about Iran. And how they're flipping the switch and, funding all these proxies, but also consider the Houthis that are in the Red Sea, and they're making it difficult for us to trade. They're closing up trade lanes. So imagine China now looking at this and saying, wow, you have a Biden administration that isn't doing anything about the Houthis, closing up trading lanes. Maybe a good time for me to take over Taiwan. You see how all of this stuff comes into play. So those are some of the lessons, all right? Lesson number one, lots of people don't think like we do. We're seeing that in the West with these anti-Jew, anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas people all around college campuses. Lesson number two, the next generation is in serious peril, where, again, a recent Harvard poll shows that young Americans 18 to 24 agree that white people are oppressors and people of color are the oppressed. So, again, we're becoming a tribalist nation, which is absolutely scary. And then you look at foreign policy, weakness breeds aggression, and look at all the chaos that's going on around the world and the chaos that's going to come here because we have foreigners coming in due to Biden's strategy to keep the borders open, which I talked about yesterday, the Cloward-Piven strategy to overwhelm the welfare system and make more of us poor, and they're utilizing that particular strategy on the border. Next, lesson number four, what goes around comes around, using these executive orders and then cramming through a bunch of judicial nominees. This stuff needs to be done legislatively so we don't turn into a banana republic. That's what we're seeing now. One final lesson, Shapiro writes for 2023 that we've learned: incompetence has consequences. He says we live in the richest and most powerful country in human history. The truth obscures the effects of incompetence at every level, but not for long. Eventually, the people tire of the incompetence of their leaders. And when they start tiring of the incompetence of their leaders, instead of just throwing away the leader, they throw away the whole system. And we have to be careful not to do that. All right. And we're seeing that predominantly on the left. We're seeing that, right? Trump was bad. We got to destroy, he says, make America great again. Constitution is systemically racist. We got to throw the whole system down the drain. Yeah, no. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And I got to admit, sometimes I get into the fever, to the fever pitch myself. I see, the left throwing Trump off the ballot in these places. And I'm like, do we need to throw Biden off the ballot? But no, we can't. We can't do that. We just won't have the United States. We just will not have a United States. So anyway, those are some takeaways from 2023. Next, I want to address this Nikki Haley thing. So if we could run this clip real quick. This is Nikki Haley addressing the backlash that she got on, I guess the show is called Good Morning New Hampshire, with a gentleman by the name of Jack Heath. And so you guys might recall that Nikki Haley was at some type of presser or some type of town hall, and she claims there was a Democrat plant in the audience. And if you follow me on Twitter, I posted the video. I responded to the video on X at Carl Jackson Show. I'm on X. Please follow me there. But basically, someone asked her, "Hey, why did the Civil War start?" And she gives this long, elaborated answer. And then she's backtracking. She never mentions slavery. She talked about freedom in general, which I think, okay, maybe I was a little too harsh yesterday. I have my moments too where sometimes I jump the gun. Maybe I was a little too harsh, but I'm still frustrated because I don't think the fact that it was a Democrat plant, if indeed that is true, I shouldn't say the fact. If indeed that is true, it's completely irrelevant. Her answer was a disaster. I want you to hear her excuse, if you will, and then which actually has some good points. And then I'm going to address it right after this. Gabe, let's go ahead and roll the audio, por favor.
You were asked about the cause of the United States Civil War. Any regrets for not saying that the South not wanting to abolish slavery was an underlying cause?
Well, two things on this, Jack. I mean, of course, the Civil War was about slavery. We know that. That's the easy part of it. What I was saying was, what does it mean to us today? What it means to us today is about freedom. That's what that was all about. It was about individual freedom. It was about economic freedom. It was about individual rights. Our goal is to make sure, no, we never go back to the stain of slavery, but what's the lesson in all of that? That we need to make sure that every person has freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do and be anything they want to be without anyone or government getting in the way. That was the goal of what that was at. Yes, I know it was about slavery. I'm from the South. Of course you know it's about slavery. But let's go to the second point of this. The second point of this is, why did this happen? Jack, the media has yet to connect the dots. First of all, I am the only candidate that Biden and the Democrats are running billboard ads against in Iowa. If you watch my town halls, this happened in my entire last swing. It'll happen this swing. Biden and the Democrats keep sending Democrat plants to do things like this to get the media to react. We know when they're there. We know what they're doing. Why is Biden doing that? Why isn't he doing it to any other candidate? It's because he knows I defeat him by double digits. It's also because they know they want to run against Trump. They're trying to help Trump. They've tried to help Trump this whole time. I mean, whether it's the Colorado Supreme Court, whether it's the other court cases, whether it's the fact that they're now hitting me, why is it that they're doing this? See this for what it is. They get that Trump and Biden are head-to-head on a good day. Trump may be up by 2 points, 4 points in the margin of error. In every single one of those same polls, I'm up by double digits. The Wall Street Journal showed me beating Biden by 17 points. So, yes, I'll answer this question today, and we'll keep responding to it. And the reason this happens is because in our town halls, I answer every question. And they are planning them there, and I'm going to answer those questions. And so this is just part of what's going to continue to happen.
Okay, so that is Nikki Haley and her response to what she is alleging was a Democrat plant inside of a town hall that she was giving in New Hampshire, and she made some points that are relevant. But I want to speak to some of those. First off, let me just say this: I'm so sick and tired of the right or the Republican Party, as it were, not putting the left on defense. All right, this is my biggest frustration. I'm a never Nikki Haley person. All right, at least when it comes to the primary, and I can't lie to you. I know a lot of conservatives will get mad. I have a hard time even considering the thought of voting for this chick were she to become the nominee, or even if she was on the ticket with Trump or I don't think DeSantis will put her on the ticket. Trump has now come out. Basically, Donald Trump Jr. said, no, we're not having that. And I'm glad, because I think he was floating a trial balloon, Trump was initially. So I'm glad Donald Trump Jr. came out and said, no, not going to happen. I do believe she's a Democrat. She's a Democrat. What a Democrat was 15, 20 years ago. That is my honest belief. I mean, she uses identity politics. She's a big spender. She's a big war hawk. So anyway, but that's Nikki Haley. But I don't understand why she didn't put the left on the defense. For God's sakes, we are the party. We are the party that demolished the KKK. We are the party that ended slavery. We are the party that gave freedmen the right to vote, that established citizenship. We were the party of civil rights for over 100 years before, or nearly 100 years before, the Democrat Party tried to co-opt it in 1964 when they saw the tables turning against them. And even then, it was the Republican legislature that overwhelmingly backed LBJ to get the Civil Rights Act passed of 1964. So put the onus back on the Democrat Party. For God's sakes, it's so crazy. That's just an issue that I have, frankly, with all of the Republican candidates. Put the left on defense. I feel like we beat each other up so much that we forget to beat up on the Democrat Party. And we need to take this issue back. The Republican Party is not a racist party. You mean to tell me that we fought for civil rights for 100 years and then at the flip of a switch, we became racist? You know what? The left will say, well, so many Democrats changed to the Republican Party that there was never a big switch. You had 26 senators in the South during the time of this supposed big switch era with Richard Nixon, and one turned, and I forget his name, one turned into a Republican. We didn't win back the House, the GOP, until 1994. The big switch is a big freaking lie. I mean, it's just insane. And this is what drives me nuts about Nikki Haley. This is frankly what drives me nuts about the Republican Party. All right, now moving on. All right, let's get to this. I want to get to this story in Maine, and then I want to offer up a solution. I'll wrap this up with a solution to reform this rogue prosecutions, these rogue prosecutions that we see going on. So let's go ahead and play this clip. This is on Fox News late night. And here's Ari Fleischer responding to Trump being removed from the ballot in Maine, or at least the attempt. And I'll give you the latest update on that by this lady by the name of Shinna Bellows, I believe is her name. A total stunt move to get more attention for herself. So anyway, we'll talk about that. But let's go ahead and roll this video, Gabe, por favor.
Our panel, former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer, Olivia Beavers, congressional reporter for Politico, and Fox News senior political analyst Juan Williams. Ari, to you first on this news coming out of Maine, and then there were two still waiting for the Supreme Court to decide on Colorado. What do you make of this latest decision?
What are the Democrats so afraid of? Are they afraid of democracy? They don't want to have somebody on the ballot because they don't think they can beat him fair and square, so they knock him off the ballot? Look, Trace, this is so anti-democratic. I hope the Supreme Court strikes this down. But this is the violation of the norms, and you can't complain that Trump violates the norms when the Democrats go out and do the exact same thing, even worse in this instance, themselves.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Ari Fleischer, as usual, well, most of the time, 95% of the time, I would say, hits the nail on the head. I mean, this is so easy to spot. I mean, what a distraction, guys. Listen, if you're listening to this podcast, you're on the left, or you're a Democrat, you're a liberal, perhaps you're not a commie. Even though I would argue, just by voting Democrat at this point, all right, well, you got to start examining. This stuff. But don't you think it's strange that all of a sudden these cases that they could have brought all along, they never brought? Like 3 years later, all of a sudden Trump is guilty of an insurrection. Why didn't this stuff come up before? Why did they wait until we were actually in the election season and Trump was running for the GOP primary and running for president again before it comes up? Here's the nutbag, Shinna Bellows. I see Gabe. I totally forgot about that. So Gabe, good work getting this video up. I want you to hear this lady that is going around and patting herself on the back, going to different news organizations like MSNBC, giving herself accolades as if she's done something great. She's done nothing great. This freaking nut job, this communist, is destroying the fabric of the United States of America. She's destroying the rule of law. But here she is on her little bragging tour. Let's go ahead and roll the tape, por favor, Gabe.
It's a very detailed decision. We lay out why under Maine law, the Secretary of State has the authority, indeed the obligation, I'm duty bound to make this determination. I laid out that the record demonstrates that, in fact, the events of January 6, 2021, which were unprecedented and tragic, were an insurrection in the meaning of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And finally, in reviewing the facts presented, the evidence, the law, the history, we determined under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that Mr. Trump engaged in insurrection and therefore was disqualified.
Now, I have to say, not only is this an incredibly important decision, but it's a very brave decision.
Okay, the guy, whatever he was about to say, I've seen this guy plenty of times. I can't believe this guy has a job on him. I take that back. I should believe he has a job on MSNBC, which is exactly why you shouldn't watch MSNBC. I forget his name, but the guy's straight up propaganda, says the craziest, most racist stuff ever, and they reward him with a show. And so anyway, this chick goes on. She's a Secretary of State of Maine. All right, she's trying to sound smart. How the hell does a Secretary of State, excuse me, I got to stop cussing. How the H-E double hockey sticks does the Secretary of State of Maine have the legal authority to remove a president or a candidate running for president in the Republican Party? She's a Democrat. She was just got her job in 2021, a couple of days before Biden's inauguration, or a couple of weeks before Biden's inauguration or so. How does she unilaterally get to make a decision for all Republicans and the entire Republican Party to remove Trump from the primary ballot in Maine? How does she get that authority? The truth is, she doesn't have that authority, but she thinks you're dumb so she can come on shows like that show on MSNBC and just lie out of her freaking teeth. Trump has never been charged with insurrection. Trump has never been convicted of insurrection. This is absolutely freaking insane. That's why I say that we live in a post-constitutional America. This is insane. She doesn't have the authority to do this. And there was no insurrection. People didn't bring weapons to overturn the government. This wasn't like the insurrections that we saw popping up across the country in 2020, the Democrat insurrections that BLM and Antifa led. Just insane. All right, now moving on. How do we stop these rogue prosecutors? And in this case, this isn't a prosecutor, but the rules apply just the same. There was a fabulous article that I want to close out with. And again, guys, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. We're on Apple, we're on Google, Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on Rumble. Wherever you can, leave comments. I will try to get to them. I'm figuring out how to comment back, to be honest with you, on YouTube, but I promise you I'll get there. Please rate and review the show on YouTube and Rumble. Give us a high score. I believe that is a 5. And if you do that, that'll help more people see our show. We would certainly appreciate that. Be sure to subscribe wherever you go as well. And then just a reminder, the promo code for mypillow.com to take advantage of these deals, these Giza Dream Bed Sheet deals. It is you can go to the Radio Podcast Square and enter my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, or give them a call, 800-858-0263. And right now, for a limited time, those Giza Dream Sheets are 50% off. But also, there are discounts all across the board. Go to mypillow.com, American jobs, American manufacturing, a good night's rest, all right? So mypillow.com, promo code Carl, or give them a call, 1-800-858-0263. Use my name, Carl. All right, so let me close out with this. I saw this really great article on Real Clear Politics regarding prosecutorial reforms that need to be made for political witch hunts or for political trials. And that's exactly what we see Donald Trump going through now. And I know some of you out there don't believe it because you hate the man. Guys, I mean, I just encourage you to read the law. I seriously, read the law. I mean, just pretend like Trump isn't in the equation if you hate him. All right, and just read the law. But this guy starts off, it's a guy by the name of K.S. Bruce, and it's a great article on Real Clear Politics. He says criminal prosecutions of active political candidates and their families, their allies, require special safeguards to protect the democratic process itself. Whenever you're dealing with a political candidate, all right, they shouldn't get special treatment, but they shouldn't get bad or excessively horrible treatment based on the fact that they're a political candidate. We're supposed to have equal protection under the law, and at the same time be able to not conflate a crime, mingle it with our political process, all right? And that's exactly what we see the left trying to do, even though there was no crime that has taken place. He says this is true whether Democrats are pursuing Republicans or vice versa. The need for even-handedness is even higher when elections themselves are at stake. So you see what the left is trying to do, bring all of these trials, try to bombard Trump with all of these trials. So all the money that he collects, all of his resources are spent on these trials while he's trying to win the primary and get elected for 2024 as president. And the resources that he could be using and the RNC could be using for down ballot races, that's totally wiped out. That's what the left is trying to do. That's what these trials are about. All right. They're trying to give Biden the advantage. If indeed he is going to run, they're trying to give him an advantage. The polls aren't working, so they are coming out the boondock. They are coming out from the woodworks, whether it's the Colorado Supreme Court. Thank God the Michigan Supreme Court came in and said, listen, we're rejecting this. Trump isn't being removed from the ballot. So then you get this nutcase, the Secretary of State in Maine, that says she's going to remove him from the ballot without the man ever being even charged. And even not in her jurisdiction. She's in Maine. If there was an insurrection, it occurred in D.C. You have a special counsel working on that. But anyway, this is where we are. So here are some of the solutions, all right, to end the prosecutorial witch hunts and to establish some prosecutorial reforms. Number one, increased right to change venues and judges. He says the public will not long accept a system where Democrats are convicted by Republican judges in Republican venues and Republicans are convicted by Democrat judges in cities controlled by Democrats. Now, he's speaking of political, opponents, politicians. All right. This isn't some Joe Schmo goes before a judge for theft. You know what I'm saying? And the judge happens to be Republican and no one knows. All right. He's not, you know what I'm saying? He's talking about the federal court system. He's talking about politicians. He says ignoring the risk of potential political bias by judges or local populations is a fantasy. All right. Now, I disagree with this to some extent because I do believe that what Republican appointed judges, for the most part, try to do is they try to abide by the rule of law. They try to abide by the Constitution. Oftentimes, they are tough on crime because they believe in following the law. All right. So I disagree with that notion to some extent. I do believe that Democrats and those on the left tend to be more likely or are more likely to weaponize the judicial system. Now, also, let me say this just real quickly. He says, all right, so here's the safeguard, the solution to that. All right, he says one safeguard would be to expand the defendant's ability to seek a change of venue and a trial before an impartial judge. Guys, we all know that Donald Trump will never get a fair trial inside of Washington, D.C. When you have a city that votes, I think it's 90 or 95% Democrat. Actually, I think it's 95% Democrat. Do you think he'll ever get a jury in front of his peers in Washington, D.C. when 95 out of 100 people that come in to sit in the jury hate his guts? Come on now. All right, so they need to have a change of venue. That needs to be easier for the parties. And also, judges, if you get, obviously you're dealing with Trump, you get a judge that's appointed by Obama. I don't know how that works, especially knowing that Obama wanted to fundamentally transform America and appointed judges that I believe agreed with him. All right. So he says if a crime is real and serious, a defendant can be considered likely to be found guilty in any venue. So that's how you know. You can change it. And if the guy's guilty, then you can trust that if he goes up against a jury of his peers, they're going to find him guilty. But if the political candidate is only guilty in certain venues, he should not be guilty anywhere. And that is the case. That's why they have to try these cases in D.C. or New York City, where you got a bunch of left-wing kooks. All right, number two, no novel theories or selective prosecutions. All right, you can't just make up laws on the fly, right, for political purposes. He says if a prosecutor has not used a theory in the normal case against other non-political defendants, the prosecutor should not use the new and untested theory against a political defendant in the midst of an election. All right, so you just can't come up with some new and untested theory to use against your political opponent that has never existed before for a person that's just a everyday Joe Schmo, somebody that is not elected. He says, and also appeals to a higher courts on motions to dismiss should be accelerated to resolve open issues ahead of an election season. So the moment Trump files an appeal, that appeal needs to be looked at immediately so it doesn't disturb the electoral process. All right. Number three, third-party oversight on the selection and activities of special prosecutors. He writes, every U.S. attorney general is, by definition, a political appointee, so is inevitably at risk, at least the perception of political bias. Or, it looks like they might have political bias, or at least the perception is there. He says elections and respect for elections are at stake. So we can't give any political appointee the unilateral right to assign prosecutors who will be seen by many Americans as attack dogs against their political enemies, or conversely, a lapdog. Easy on their political allies. And we see this with the special counsel appointed by AG Merrick Garland, Jack Smith. Jack Smith, everyone knows, is a political left-wing hack going after President Trump. I can't even tell you the name of the special counsel that was going after Biden. Biden, who had top secret information taking top secret information to his homes while he was vice president and Senate, and Hunter Biden getting to take a sneak peek of some of this stuff? Did you know that special counsel has already dismissed, basically, and perhaps I'm not using the correct legal wording, but he's already dismissed all the cases against Biden? So Biden is done. His special counsel wrapped up. Oh, nothing to see here. And Trump is still going through it. He says, here's what happened originally when it came to special prosecutors. The original special prosecutor law in 1978 did not empower the attorney general to choose the prosecutor. Rather, it established a panel of 3 U.S. appeals court judges to select the special prosecutor. And once the attorney general decided that such a special counsel was needed, all right, this or a similar system could be reinstated. So essentially, you would have Merrick Garland that would establish a panel of 3 U.S. appeals court judges. Those judges would pick a special counsel, if you will, and Merrick Garland's hands would totally be out of it for real. With how far we've moved beyond the Constitution, I'm not sure if that is actually the case anymore. I think we need to get rid of these special counsels. But anyway, this would be an in between. You know, this would be one of those bipartisan things, as they say. All right, number 4. No compelled confessions or forced flipping. So basically, he says it doesn't inspire public confidence to watch somebody that's a low-level ally of President Trump or whatever, or he says of a political target. He doesn't use Trump's name. I'm throwing in the name. All right, to be threatened with decades of jail time unless he or she flips against higher-ups to avoid jail time entirely. So basically, they'll get people in, and, you know, like they did in Georgia, hey, if you don't flip on Trump, if you don't do this and that, we're going to absolutely destroy your life. You're going to spend 20 years in prison. You're going to spend 30 years in prison. We're going to throw this charge at you, and we're the federal government, so we have the resources that you have that you don't have. We'll make your life a living hell. Okay, I'll flip. No. None of that. You cannot do that. Either the evidence is there or either the evidence is not. He says, similarly, a guilty confession by a political target means little if the prosecutors obtain the confession by threatening the defendant's family with excessive jail time or destruction. He says the goal of a political trial is not to obtain a conviction at all costs, but rather to obtain a proper conviction. All right, in a measured and unbiased way. No cover-ups with crimes. So this is what happened to Michael Flynn. The FBI came to interview Michael Flynn when he was the national security advisor for Donald Trump. It was a brief stint. So Michael Flynn was coerced into pleading guilty to a charge of lying to prosecutors and their investigators, even though no underlying crime had occurred. In other words, they should have never interviewed Michael Flynn because there was never a crime. And so when they started asking him questions, they could say he's lying because he might misremember. He might have simply forgot. No, I wasn't there. No, I didn't, you know. And then they bring, well, you said this. We have this person that says you said this. We have this. And, oh, well, okay, I guess I did. Well, you just lied to the FBI. So that's a criminal offense. Now you're going to spend some time in jail unless you flip on the president. No more of that. No more of that. No cover up with crimes. If there was not a crime committed, you don't have the right as a prosecutor to go and question somebody about a crime that was never committed. This is really simple. He says any such misstatements should be deemed immaterial if there was no crime to cover up in the first place. So that's what happened with Michael Flynn. He didn't lie. He made some misstatements. They said he was trying to cover up just because they wanted to get at Trump. And so that needs to go bye-bye. No cover-ups without crimes. So Michael Flynn wasn't covering up for Donald Trump. There was never a crime. All right, got that? Now, here's a question he has. How can we determine when these higher standards of procedural fairness come into effect? Stop and consider the political process as a whole, he said. So if we can't have them for every criminal case, we at least need them when more than the defendant's rights are at stake, when the prosecution has repercussions for elections or our political process as a whole. So if these prosecutors, if what they're doing in going after a political candidate, if it's not just going to affect that political candidate, if it's actually going to affect the election process, this is something we have to do away with. Those are 5 steps to prosecutorial reform. Increased right to change venues and judges. That's number 1. Number 2, no novel theories or selective prosecutions. Number 3, a third-party oversight on the selection and activities of special prosecutors. Number 4, no compelled confessions or forced flipping. Number 5, no cover-ups without crimes. And then there we go. We can reform the federal prosecutorial abuse that we see going on. All right, guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. This is our last podcast of 2023, so I know you're sad, but the good news is you'll see me next week. I'll see you as well. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and until next time, do not grow weary doing good. God bless you.